Good morning, everyone. Looks like I'm a little bit early, so I'm going to give everybody just a minute here. I don't want to take off and leave anyone. Okay, now it's 9 o'clock. We're getting a little bit closer to having everybody logged in. So my name is Sarah with Harrisburg Project, and today we're going to go over how to prepare for the December 1 child count that is due on February 25th. If you were with me in December, this is going to be a similar training that was kind of a pre-prep, I guess I should say. So now it's time to start getting this data ready. We need to be doing work and preparing again for February 25th. So if you have any questions today, you can ask them in the questions pod. It's going to be in your GoToWebinar flyout. If you can't see the questions option, look for an orange arrow. If you click on that, it will open up a menu that will not only have the questions pod, but also it will have your handout for today. So it's going to be similar to last month's handout with some additions, since we are now actually into the preliminary snapshot period. So we have some additions to what we went over last month. So I always like to do something in December to talk about what's upcoming. So some of this is a bit of a repeat. So if you were with me last month, some of this will be a little bit familiar. I think that's all the housekeeping issues. Again, if you do have questions, ask those during the session. I'll be keeping an eye on my questions pod over here. And if we do have more questions at the end, I can always go into my training system and show examples in there if we need to do that, if we need to look over. All righty. So what we're going to go over today, what should you be doing to prepare for the December 1 child count? So we'll go over the maintenance tasks that need to be completed. Basically, you're going to make sure that you have all of your students entered in the system, and if they shouldn't be there, you're going to make sure that you've deleted them out. After that, you're going to start working on the error listings that you have. If you do have any errors, we want to make sure that those kids are cleaned up as well. So we'll talk about some common errors that I've seen. I did go back and look at the error report that we sent yesterday to see what the common theme was. So I've kind of updated that from last month a little bit, and we'll talk about reports. We'll talk about the 2026 snapshot dates. As some of you may know, we have preliminary snapshots that we do, and then we'll have the final. So we try to give you as much information as possible leading up to this due date. I'll go through the child count status pages. Since we are in iStar Plus, this is the first time we'll be doing the December 1 child count snapshot in the new system. Some of the things are in different spots, of course, under different menus, and we'll talk about those. We also have a whole new section for child count as well. So we'll look at those pages, and then, of course, how you can get some support from us if you need help with this. So what is the December 1 child count? So this is an unduplicated count of students that are active on December 1st, 2024. It's all fund codes except for N and U, and it is for error-free records. The students have to be ages 3 through 21. So although they can go through 22, that is acceptable. The count for IDEA only includes 3 through 21. Okay, so they have to be error-free records. So if they're disapproved, then they won't count. That is used for your state performance plan indicators 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. Your tuition cost sheets that we use for claims in the spring and the fall, or spring and the summer and part of fall actually. It's for your non-public proportionate share. So funds L and P are going to be taken from the December 1 child count for your proportionate share if you have any. And then your previous year child count is used for your special ed profile. Both current and previous are used for your maintenance of effort worksheets, indicator 4B, and your ISB report card. And this is not all. There are probably more things that maybe I don't even realize. So, you know, this is not limited to this list. So it's a very important count. In comparison, you would probably want to be able to compare that to your enrollment count that's in SIS. So they take a fall and a spring enrollment. This is your special ed enrollment, essentially. Okay. So what do we need to be doing to prepare for this? So even though we're looking at students that were active on December 1st, the count is not actually taken until February 25th. So after that day, you won't be able to make any changes in iStar. Right now, you can make those changes. After the count is taken, we do have a time period where ISB will look at the data, do any overrides or anything that they need to do to make the data better. So they do evaluate the data before it's actually finalized by them, but that doesn't mean you can make any changes. So after February 25th, nothing will change on your end. Once we open the system back up, you can go in and make any changes that you need to. It's just not going to change the count that was taken. So if you look in there and, you know, we're all human. If you forgot 3 kids, you can add them in there and they'll be claimable or whatever you need for the rest of the year, but it's not going to change the count that we took. Okay. So we're not going to limit your data entry after that count is submitted. So what we want to do is make sure it's as accurate as possible on February 25th. So at this point in the year, I would not suspect that you would have a lot of deleting to do. If you've been involved with data entry, you've been logging into iStar and working, you're probably in good shape. Now, I will say that we did have a good little handful of districts and schools that had a 0 child count when we took our preliminary snapshot Friday. We've reached out to them. That's not something we want to see at this point in the year, obviously, but places like that who haven't been looking at the data all year are going to have some deletes to make. So if the child did not attend at all this year, they rolled over during the rollover, but they moved over the summer, then we're going to delete those records out of iStar. Okay. So we don't want those kids in there at all at this point in the year. Now, you do that with the trash can under the student approval data for that child. Again, most of you have probably already taken care of these deletes, but we do not want them in the system if they did not receive services at all in this school year. So from Student Central, we are deleting the student approval record with the trash can icon. Okay. So those are your deletes. What else should you be doing? We want to make sure that you've added all your new students in. So students that started at the beginning of the school year, students that have started since. So you can have students that are new to iStar, new to the district, or both at the beginning of the year. That can also happen throughout the year. You can have students that move into you mid-year with IEPs already. You can have existing students that move into iStar. So maybe they've been existing students in the district, they've been enrolled, but they have been initially evaluated and they need to start receiving services. So those are the kids you're going to be putting into the system. So we want to make sure that you're adding in new kids. So one way to do that is to use the plus sign under Student Central. You're going to search with the SIS ID or the first name, last name, date of birth, and gender combo. And that's how you're going to add in new students. They have to have a SIS ID at a minimum to be in the system. So you can add like that. Another way some people like to add is if you use the unreported students under utilities. So you have both options. If you use unreported students, that means you have to wait for them to be enrolled in your district in SIS. So sometimes people in iStar don't want to wait for that enrollment. They'll go ahead and get them added, and then when the enrollment's there, any errors that are occurring will go away automatically. So either way is an option. I call this from scratch. So if you want to add from scratch, then you can do it here. If you want to use unreported, then that's going to be under your utilities. Okay, so we've got a question. In what situations will we need to have duplicate or multiple records of a student in iStar? Well, I'm going to say for the most part, it's rare. But the most common instance would be if you have a student that is a therapeutic day student And so they are a private facility fund B for tuition, but maybe they also reside at that facility. So we would need a tuition record and a residential record. Another example might be if you have a child that is at, like maybe they're an orphan, they're at a public day school, but half a day, and at the public district half a day. That could happen as well. So there are several circumstances, but again, the most common is going to be our residential kids, where they have what we call room and board on top of tuition. So those will be the most common. Under those circumstances, you're going to see a duly enrolled checkbox on the approval record, and you would check that on each of those records. For the most part, though, you will not have overlapping records. So if you have overlaps, those usually will create errors, whether it's an overlap within your own district where you've accidentally created multiple records, or if it's an overlap with another district in the state. Maybe they have moved from there and they haven't released them yet. Also, you need to make sure that when you're looking at overlaps that you're thinking about the possibility of CIS or iStar. So it can be an overlap in iStar, or it can be an existing overlap between CIS still. So those are the things that you would be looking at, both systems. Of course, we only deal with iStar, so you would have to be able to talk to the iStar data manager at another district if it's a CIS issue as well, and have them take care of that. So during the school year, you're also going to come across situations where something has changed on the student's record and you need to reflect that. So if something changes on the approval record during the school year, then you're going to want to do an end add. And what this will do is end the current record, make a copy of it, and allow you to move on with the changes on the new record. So again, if something changes for the student, then we're going to do the end add. That's going to be the chain link under student approval data. So again, from Student Central, we're going to supply the end date for when the current services ended. The reason will be a 20 for a change, and then it will make a copy of the existing record. The new record will be an exact copy except for the begin date. The begin date will be reflected as one day after the end date that you provided, again, so we don't have an overlap. If you need to edit those things, that's fine. You can go back in and make edits if you need to. What this does is prevent you from having to create a whole new record from scratch. So it's just a time saver. So, all right. Okay, if I have a student attending a day school part of the day and 2 classes at the high school, do I check duly enrolled on the A and B records? No. We do not need a claim for the A. Actually, I think it will let you do that now that I say that. Since it's a public and a private, what it won't let you do is an A and an A, but I think it will let you do an A and a B. Excuse me. So yes, I think that will work. I can't remember all the valid combinations. All right, next, when a student is coded the same in CIS and iStar Plus for a private facility, what would cause an RCDTS error? The school is probably the wrong one. So if you have a private facility student, you need to make sure that if you're using the therapeutic code, that the RCDTS code matches. The school code will be different for a regular program versus a therapeutic program, or not therapeutic, intensive. So basically, if they have an aid, it's a different number. So that school number has to match for the RCDTS. All right, and then how to edit records in iStar. So if you're going to end a student, or if you've made a mistake on a record that you find, you're going to use the pencil under student approval data and make the change on the record, and then click check errors and save it. So again, edits typically are going to be for ending students, so a permanent end, or if you see a mistake. Otherwise, I recommend that you do end ads if you're making changes. If you make an edit on a record without doing the end ad, you're going to lose the history of that record. So that's why I say if it's a mistake, that's fine, correct it. We don't want to preserve the history of a mistake. But if it's just a change, then we want to do the end ad. Okay. I'm getting a lot of errors that a school is not accepting new placements when there has been a meeting about that student attending. How do I fix this error? If you're getting errors on not accepting new placements for private facilities, you need to send us an email with the SIS IDs on those kids, and we need to take a look at that. Okay. So I mentioned earlier, not only, I mean, you obviously have to have these records in the system, right? But they also have to be error-free. So you cannot have any errors. If you have warnings, that's okay. How do you tell the difference? The error starts with an F for fatal. Warnings start with a W. Doesn't mean that warnings aren't important, but you need to focus on the fatal errors first. Okay? So we have a lot of SIS errors right now. We have over 20,000 errors in the state right now, and that's not including Chicago. There are over, I think, over 40,000 right now. So a lot of those are going to be SIS errors. The first one that I saw is F145. This is where the student was not found in SIS for the resident RCDT. This is usually due to a district that has not let their enrollment go yet. So you need to be reaching out to your iStar contacts at the other districts, making sure you're getting those taken care of. So they need to make sure that they are ending or deleting the enrollments from last year, or I'm sorry, from this year that are not relevant. So you can go ahead and pick those kids up. Okay, so how do you find that person? How do you figure out who the data manager is for iStar? You're going to go under resources and you're going to run the pupil site contact report. So it's under resources and it's the pupil contact report. That's going to tell you the person's email and phone number that you need to contact for that particular district. It may not be the district office. They may be under a cooperative. So that's going to give you the information that you need. Again, this is going to be the iStar contact. They will then have to go to the district contact for SIS and relay these messages if they're SIS related. Student not found in SIS for serving RCDT. So this is going to be where an enrollment needs to be added that reflects the proper serving district. So remember, on the service provider and the serving school, the first four areas, the RCDT needs to match: region, county, district, and type. We have some 146s right now, but we have a lot of 147s. And 149s. So the 147 and the 149 I saw a lot of yesterday. The iStar dates are not equal to or within the SIS enrollment dates. And then the second one, 149, is the one that we just had a question about. Student not found in SIS for private facility. That means that the school code probably doesn't match. So we need to make sure that we're using the proper RCDTS code. So the RCDT code may match, but the school codes are not correct. And again, the most common issue there is that you're using the intensive program in iStar and it's not reflecting that in SIS. Okay, can a student be enrolled in two different locations? He spends half the day at a daycare and the other half at a public school. They can be enrolled in SIS half the day, but they won't have two records in iStar because their fund code's not going to change. They're probably just a fund code A at both of those. So I think that SIS can do a half and half if they need to. All right, F112 is going to be showing up for all of your kindergartners. If you haven't already corrected this, you cannot use the early childhood educational environment codes for kids that are in kindergarten and are 5 or older. So at the beginning of the year, if you've not done anything with your data, you're probably going to have to change the EE code to what I call them the big kid codes or the school age codes for all of your kindergartners. So they have to be 5 or older and in kindergarten. And we're going to want to use the codes starting 01, 02, 03, etc. We've already had several questions about disability of N. So this is developmental delay after the student turns 10 years old. This is not a valid eligibility, so they cannot have that for their primary disability in iStar anymore. And we don't allow you to edit that disability. It's grayed out once it's selected. So if you need to change the disability, you're going to have to use the end add function to do that. So that's going to require an end add. And then I saw many indicator 13 errors where indicator 13 was not complete. So we really need to work on these. I'm not sure what the common theme is or the issue is, but this is one that I threw into this presentation just yesterday because of looking at the error report. So we have a lot of those. So you need to make sure that you're at least filling out the form. If you don't have the transition plan for them, then you're going to have to put no's in. Because, you know, it's not going to, right now, it's not going to count. There is a possibility that they will turn the indicator errors into warnings temporarily for child count, but that's not always a guarantee. So these need to be corrected. And again, you're just going to have to answer the form. So if it's a no, then it's a no. We're going to have to go ahead and report it. So right now, things are a little bit different than they were in December. We have actually started the December 1 child count preliminary snapshots. So we're doing a dress rehearsal every week, all right? Every Friday morning at 7 a.m., ISB runs the snapshot process. It's not the final, but it is like a dress rehearsal. It's giving you the opportunity to come into iStar and look at the records and see what your count would be if we were to take it that day. We've got plenty of time to continue to prepare, but we need to be working on it. So we sent error emails out Monday. Again, I think over 23,000 errors that we sent out. So that alone should be keeping everybody busy. However, since today is Tuesday, our first child count, our preliminary snapshot was taken on Friday. So you are able to see that first glance at where you're at. If you want to go in and look at what your child count would look like today, possibly, since we took it on Friday, it's not changed in the preliminary section. We'll go over that here in a few minutes. But if you want to go in and look at what your child count would possibly look like today, you can run a report. It's going to be under student and student approvals. We're going to do the alpha list of students. Make sure that you uncheck this checkbox right here that says null. Change your active as of date to December 1st. Include on approval, we're going to change it to yes, and then report type, student approvals, alphabetical list of students, and you can view that report. That's going to give you an idea of, you know, if you've made any changes since Friday, it should be reflected here, okay? So a pretty decent idea of where you stand today. Okay, so starting this past Friday, we've been doing those snapshots 7 a.m. So you'll be able to check each Friday. I think it takes about 20 minutes, maybe. So that's what we're going to be doing now. That means you can come in, you can look, assess, make changes, and you can do that through February 25th. So on a due date, when is the data actually due? Well, we're going to lock you out at 12 o'clock a.m. on February 26th. So you technically have through February 25th at 11:59 p.m. After that, the system will close. Last year, we opened up really quickly. The data work that we have to do after the fact, we know what it is. We get right to it. We had that done here. We had our part done in half a day last year. So we closed on Thursday. We were ready to roll. Basically that next afternoon, we were ready to go. So sometimes ISB has a little bit more they have to do, but regardless, we shouldn't be closed that long. We set aside 2 weeks. We've never been closed for 2 weeks. We know it is inconvenient for all of you, so we're trying to get it open as fast as we can. It will never change that there are going to be things that are going to have to be looked at by a person after the fact. If you have any involvement with the DCFS file and us, you know that. So all we're doing is going to make it better, okay? So in January and February, the big thing you want to ensure is that your superintendent or your director or whoever is going to sign off on this number in March is watching this information at that time. If they don't like what they see, then it needs to be corrected now. January and February up until the 25th is when they need to be involved, because they're going to have to certify this number in March. And basically they are saying, I verify that this is correct. Every year we get one call of someone that doesn't want to do that because they want to change the number. If you want to change the number, now's the time, January and February. So most of you are not going to be responsible for that. So you do need to make sure that the person that is going to do that is paying attention now. Some of you are responsible for 20 superintendents to make sure that they're paying attention. So we need to start sending that communication right now. Okie doke. Child count status. So in iStar Classic, you had a child count status button that you would go look at each week. This is going to be under data collection. It's still called child count status. You're going to want to look at that every day. Or not every day. You're going to want to look at that every week after that snapshot is taken. It's not going to change after February 25th unless we find something that needs to improve. Okay. So an example of what we would look at after the fact would be if we saw that there was a SIS issue, but maybe one district has that SIS enrollment, the other district doesn't, we can go in and we can do an end date in iStar to help you out. If you couldn't get the other district to drop the kid in iStar, we will go by a valid SIS enrollment. So we would only help. We're not going to make the count worse for anybody. We would only make it higher for someone. The only thing that would make the count lower is under normal circumstances with this process, if you did have a student that had a residential record and a tuition record, for example, it's going to get counted twice here, but that's the final piece of the cleanup, is where we make sure they're only counted one time. So that's the final piece of the cleanup. So that's something else that has to be run manually by a person before we take the final count. So this is what the new screen looks like. We're not worried about the status. If it's verified yet, it's not time for that. We're not verifying anything because the final has not been taken. So right now, what you should be focusing on is your 2026 count and the difference. So you can see this one's up 2 from last year. Are they going to be the same every year? Absolutely not. Should they be somewhat close? I would think so. If they're not, you need to have an explanation. You know, did you, a couple years ago, we had an elementary district that merged with their high school district and became a unit district. You know, that's going to be a significant change in a count. Okay, so those kinds of things. Did anything like that happen if you have a significant difference? But the first thing that causes a huge difference is going to be the errors. So if you have errors, many of those, then your count is going to be significantly low if you have a lot of those. Okay, so this is what you're looking at. It will only change every Friday. And then after the final is taken, this is where your final count will be. Okay. So this is where we're looking each week. It will only change Friday after the preliminary is run. So the report representing that count is under the student count data. and it will only change every Friday as well. So you're going to come into that and you're going to just simply make sure, of course, you're in the 25-26 school year, and you're going to hit your magnifying glass, and then you can download that to a CSV or a PDF, whatever you like. But that's where you're going to be able to see who the children are that were counted for that preliminary count. This is also where your final copy of the report will be once that is complete. Okay. So this is where you check your child count status. And again, I cannot stress enough, this is only going to change in this section every Friday at 7 a.m. If you do work for 3 days after that, it's not going to be reflected here until the next Friday. That's where you can go look at the other report under the alpha list of students. Okay. I don't think a lot of people are looking at the reports right now. I think they've just got their heads down and they're doing work as fast as they can. So we're correcting errors, we're not too concerned about, who is on the report. We're concerned about getting that number closer. Then I think if you get 2 or 3 weeks in, you start to eliminate errors. Then you get a little more particular about who's on the report and who's missing. So, all right. Do we have any questions? I've got one banked over here that I'm going to answer in just a second if I can. But if you have any other questions, please let me know. All right, so to clarify, for any change to the student's IEP, even if it is simple as a small % shift in either time in or out of gen ed, requires an NDAD. It's not required. It's just my recommendation. All right. So where to compare, can you please show where to compare 25 to 26 changes in the count? So that's under data collection, child count status. This first one right here under data collection. If you click on the plus next to that, it shows some details. It's broken out by like EE, fund code, age, maybe some different things like that. I don't think they're that relevant right now, but that plus does show you a little bit of detail about the counts. All right, can error reports be run by error codes and or grade level? Yes, we would just do that under analytics instead. So let me get logged into my training server here. Takes us just a second to log in. Okay, so the one I had banked while I'm waiting for this is a question about SIS kind of. This full day at daycare. So it's about a child that's in full day at daycare, and the daycare has a preschool for all grant. But they have walk-in speech, and it's in different towns. They're going to have to share the PDA and SIS. And I don't know how you can get them to do that, but they're going to have to share that child. You're not going to be able to, I mean, they both need to be reported. So that's an interesting one for sure. because they're probably going to be Fund A in both of the systems. I don't know how we prevent an overlap. So we may have to, that may be some kind of an exception. I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking it all the way through, but I feel like it would have to be a Fund A in 2 different districts in iStar on top of the fact that they need to share the child in SIS. So yeah, that might be a doozy. All right, so the question was, can error reports be run by error code and or grade level? So hold on just a second. I'm gonna make this a little bit easier for us to navigate. iStar plus. Okay. So we're gonna go under analytics. Of course, we want 25, 26. I'm just gonna hit the magnifying glass. This is gonna bring up all of the records. Then we're gonna go to this filter. We're going to go to additional filters and select errors, and you're going to find your error code here that you want. In this drop down, I don't know what errors they have, so let's see. We'll try this one. So you'll do that. You hit the search down here. Oh, fortunately, we do have 2 of those. And then what you would do is sort. You can sort here by grade, or you can go ahead and just export your results to a CSV and sort by grade in Excel. So that would be by the code. How do we run a report? Just our preschool students with their EE codes. You can do that here as well. So let me clear this filter, research. Okay, starting with Scratch. At Scratch again, how to report preschool. So you can put in under grade here, you can do a P. Their educational environment codes are already listed here, and you can export that however you want. CSV, if you want it in a PDF, what you have to do is just customize your headers up here and get them all in one page. So in other words, edit your column selection by taking some of this stuff out. So if you do that, then it's obviously less information across the top. Let's see if we can get it to, I don't know if we can get it to that or not. Yep. So that's how you can get a PDF. What I mean is if you have too many headings, it'll run off the page. I prefer everything in Excel, so I always do the CSV and open it up like that and sort within Excel. All right, does it mean there is one error if you have a -1 in the difference column? No, it just means your count's down by 1. Okay, it may be an error. Your count is not, I mean, Harrisburg is a smaller district and it did look closer, obviously, but your count is not always going to be the same. I wouldn't expect it to be the same every year. But if you look in there and it's 100 kids off, you need to figure out why. Do you have 100 errors or are you missing 100 kids? So that's what you need to be looking at. So we give you something to compare to, but it doesn't mean it should be the same. Okay, I have a student that's approval begin date is on 12/1. Are they included in the child count? Yes. If the begin date is 12/1, they are included. All right, do we need to log in? Do we need to have the superintendent log in each Friday leading up to the deadline to verify they review the data? No, they need to know. They need to know what's going on, but there's nothing they need to do each Friday. So they don't log in and verify each Friday by actually physically pushing something in the system, but they need to be keeping an eye on it. The verification won't come until later. All right, if you have an error 146, it means that something is not matching up between iStar and SIS. I can't say which one is correct, okay? So you would need to work with them based on their placement and make sure that what they have reflects the IEP, make sure that you have it incorrectly. So we won't know which one is correct or incorrect. Either one could be, but regardless, they have to match. So you want to make sure that things are matching. So on the screen here, actually, let's just, I don't know, it's going to be from last year. So that difference, it doesn't necessarily represent the number of errors. It could, but it's not a guarantee. So you need to make sure that you're comparing your IEP systems with iStar and that anybody that has an IEP or an ISP is in iStar. That's across the board in general. Of course, right now we're focusing on kids that were active December 1st. So I had a question, if they start on December 1st, yes, they will be included. If they started August 15th and left October 1st, they're not going to be in the count. If they start today, they will not be in the count. Okay, so they have to have an active record on December 1st to be in the count. They have to be ages 3 through 21, no fund code in and or U, and they have to be error free. So that's how we get the count. Okay, so we want it to be unduplicated, of course. So if you have kids that go to, if you have dually enrolled students like therapeutic day, if you have multiple records for them, we're only going to count that one time at the end of the process. So again, we need to make sure that the 2026 count is comparable to 25 and 24. If it's not, maybe there's a reason, and that's okay. Okay, maybe you absorbed a bunch of kids. Okay, then it would be up, right? Maybe you had a really a lot of kids graduate that weren't replaced. Okay, so you're going to have a decrease. Okay, so you just need to evaluate it, and only you can tell if it's going to be accurate or not. I would say if you work in the system like you should, you know, if you have a lot of kids and you're in there every day and you're putting kids in and you're taking kids out and doing all those things, then you're probably in good shape. But like I said earlier, we had a whole bunch of districts who hadn't even done start new year. So they had a 0 child count. So we always kind of have to talk to those people too, you know, and make sure that they're keeping up and doing deletes, even though it is late in the year to be doing that. We also have people who walk into this position January 1st and have no idea what's going on, and maybe nothing. Maybe you know, the previous person was on top of things, maybe not. So we kind of have to prepare for all of those situations. Okay, 504s are not an iStar, only IEP and ISP students. No 504s. Okie doke. I do not see any more questions right now. I will wait a few minutes here to see if anything else rolls in. So what you need to focus on again is making sure that if you want to have a different result this Friday on your snapshot, that you're working on that and getting that done. Again, these are preliminary snapshots. We're not taking them, they're not permanent. They're just to try to help you and guide you along the way. So again, it's like a dress rehearsal. You need to make sure that you have all of your changes made on the 25th, by the 25th, and that anybody that's going to be involved in certifying that number down the road is fully aware now of what direction that number is headed in. They don't have to physically do anything. It can just be as simple as you sending them an email or an instant message or a text message that says, our count is this today, this is what it was last year. Just as long as somebody knows what is going on. And again, we want them doing that because first of all, we want them involved, but second, we don't want them to be upset that they can't change the number in February. So that's why we have the due date. All righty. I don't see any other questions, so I will let you guys call in if you need us. If you are confused about this process we're going through right now, we ran a news briefing article today that should try to help. So just be sure that you're calling in, you're emailing, and you're asking the questions now when we have the time. So I will see y'all at the next session. Have a good rest of your week, and thanks for attending. Bye, guys.